reads it from there. I will remind you, you'll hear me say this a couple times, that if you do want to ask questions or join in the discussion later on in the meeting, you will need to be in the Zoom webinar. So there's a way that you could register. Again, that information is on the Idaho website, and Samantha, through us at Kearns and Weston with the team, we've sent it out a number of times. But if you listen in the YouTube live stream, we need you to hop off of there at about half point during the stretch break and come on over to the Zoom webinar, because that's the way you can raise your hand and get into the queue to ask questions and join the discussion. So while you're with us here today, of course, please remember to join your audio by either phone or computer, not both. If you would like to speak, you can raise your hand, which is, if you see that little circled red area down on the screen, that's the raise hand function. If you're on the phone, you can just press *9. You can also type questions into the Q&A box throughout the workshop. So down at the bottom of your screen, participants on the left, hover over it. Q&A comes left, to the right of that. And you can just type in a question, and throughout, as time permits, we will try to answer some of those questions. If we cannot get to all the questions, then we do a Q&A response that we'll also post to the website afterwards. This is a pretty big crowd, so the odds are we'll be typing up a lot of answers afterwards, but feel free to drop them in. It's great to hear people's thoughts. Next is remembering, of course, to leave your audio on mute when not speaking. And then, of course, remember to take it off mute so we can hear you when you want to speak. If you have any technical difficulties at all, you can chat with the host via that Q&A box at the bottom. Start your question with host. We've got folks here to help you with any technical problems. And for any other technical assistance, please email. It's GGARBER okay, at kearnswest.com, or call or text the phone number here, 206-617-7626, 206-617-7626. Thanks so much. Okay, so I think if we go on to the next slide, and where do you think we're at? Ooh, we have Jeremy with us, hooray. So Jeremy, welcome. And Guy, do you want to go ahead with bringing Jeremy onto the screen with us? Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Jeremy. And again, I will announce Jeremy Takala, a Yakima Indian Nation member and current chair of the Columbia River Intertribal Fish Commission. And Jeremy has graciously agreed to start our meeting with an opening prayer. So Jeremy.
Thank you. Nik Pachwai, Winishash, Bakhanashat, Shapatim Ki Jeremy Takala, Hopamyana we Che Pachwai Pa, Washnashtawa, Hinchiwana Pa, Kmith Pa, YM, Powan Pa, Yakima. I just want to say good day, everyone. My Indian name is Bakhanashat. That's the name that I have received not too long ago by some of the elders within my community there, and a name that has been passed down from our past men in our family. And he had many travels within the Columbia River, and both on Oregon and Washington side, fall on the seasonal round and returning back to the villages to fish. And so I carry that name to this day. I am one of the 14 elected members for Yakima Nation. I'm also serving on the Columbia River Intertribal Fish Commission as the chair. And I'm also still a fisherman. I just live about 10 minutes away from the Columbia River. So I plan to carry on that way of life as my family does to this day, my children, my nieces and nephews. And, I just want to thank the Creator for this day, to wake up and to see the sunrise and see our families, see our fellow coworkers, and that the roads were opened up for you and I to be here on this meeting, as we have a huge responsibility that we have to our lands, our resources, and our people. One of the main things that our Creator placed here for us was the foods, the legend stories, the sites, the names of places. And as one of the members of the bands of the Yakima Nation, I hold that dear to my heart. And look forward and the work that we can do to help bring the strength that our salmon need, the water, the tributaries, things that needs to be improved for generations to come. We all know our salmon are dying, and we need a action that needs to be taken for generations to come. These foods here, including our salmon, is a very important first foods, as we always honor it with the first food ceremony every year, spring, the different runs that come in, from the beginning of February all the way into the fall, winter time, and all the different foods that you go and dig and pick and prepare for our people to handle, because it's not only a food, it's also a medicine. And some of these foods that have a dire need for our help, our people, when it comes and it's presented to their table, they call it a delicacy. And back in the days, now it wasn't a delicacy. Now we consider it that, because it's so hard to go fish for these certain species of food or go find these, because one thing that our fish is up against is the climate change that's occurring, that we're seeing. And you could ask any food gatherer, any fisherman, any hunter, and they'll tell you the land is changing. Those foods don't speak, so we have to speak for them. If not, it's going to start showing us the negative effects, shorter seasons, warmer winters. And we're seeing it to this day. And it's true what our elders said: if we don't take care of it, it's going to disappear. That's our identity as the first peoples of these lands. And so, I hope that through this Columbia Basin Collaborative that, we've come to some action items or, ideas, and make a strong, swift movement to make these improvements for our nusach or our waikanish, which is our fish. So I just want to thank each and every one of you to be here today. And I know Councilman Gerald Lewis is out. He's preparing for some ceremonies tomorrow at the Longhouse with his family, which of course is going to require what we're going to be talking about today. So I'm sure he'll be preparing for the foods that is needed after they complete a ceremony, the connection that a meal has when you have a name given or a funeral or a wedding or a baby's first steps, that no matter what in our walk of life, these foods are there to help and give us strength, and that must continue on for our future generations to come. So that's where Councilman Gerald Lewis is at today and tomorrow. So with that, I want to thank our creator again, and I look forward for the work to continue for all of our species that are in the water, the ones that are on the land, the ones that grow, the ones that fly. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jeremy.
Thank you, Jeremy, for the message, and important message for us all as we move forward. And I would just announce that Lytle Denny from the Shoshone-Bannock tribe has agreed, volunteered to do an opening prayer at our next meeting. So we appreciate that as well. So thanks, Jeremy.
It's great. Thank you so much. Very much appreciated, and a wonderful way to begin the meeting. I'd like to turn next to Mike Edmondson on behalf of the 4 states and kicking off the opening remarks. Go ahead for Idaho.
Thank you all for joining us today. On behalf of the state of Idaho and the ad hoc convening group representing Oregon, Washington, and Montana, we welcome you to the second meeting for the organization of the Columbia Basin Collaborative. Jeff Allen, Jim McKenna, Guy Norman, Carrie Berg, and myself, the contributors who support us, the facilitation team from Kearns and West, and contributors from our federal partners are pleased to see this much interest and such a high level of participation. We are hopeful and we are energized. We have spent the many weeks since our last meeting with you processing the valuable comments and suggestions you have shared with our group. We have had many meetings and gathered further input from our tribal partners, federal partners, and alumni of the Columbia Basin Partnership. In the effort to recover and bring to abundance salmon stocks in the Columbia River Basin, we face substantial challenges that may seem insurmountable by any one entity, by any one tribe, sovereign, or agency, but we are encouraged that together we can overcome the challenges before us in our effort. I'm Mike Edmondson. I'm a former fish biologist, now appointed administrator of the Office of Species Conservation by Idaho Governor Brad Little. With those thoughts, I offer a moment for my partners on the ad hoc convening group to introduce themselves. Jim, maybe you start with you.
Certainly. Thanks, Mike. Appreciate those comments. Jim McCann with Governor Brown's Natural Resource Office. I'm here as a member of the ad hoc committee, and as Mike says, really happy to see the large turnout for today. Also on the group I have here is Ed Bowles with ODFW, who's joined us here today. Thanks.
Great.
Guy?
Well, can Ed, why don't you go ahead and turn on your screen for a minute just to say hello? And then we'll go ahead and go back off again, if that's all right. I may have stepped away from my screen. No worries. Guy, go ahead.
Thank you, Deb. So welcome everyone. Guy Norman, Washington member of the Northwest Power and Conservation Council, part of the ad hoc committee. Also representatives from Washington that are here today that have played a part in planning the Columbia Basin Collaborative are JT Austin, senior advisor for Governor Inslee, referring to natural resource policy, and Michael Garrity from Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife. Really good to see everyone here and a high level of interest and participation, and certainly think that the Columbia Basin Collaborative is a key to moving forward from the partnership vision to implementation of actions in real time. So look forward to working with everybody, and certainly a key is the participation of all those that are interested today and beyond. So thank you.
Hey everybody, Kerry Berg in Montana. I'm sitting in today for Mike Milburn, and I probably won't say a ton today, but looking forward to what everybody has to say and sharing those thoughts with the pertinent folks in Montana. I'd like to thank our partners in Idaho and Washington and Oregon for sparing us from a major speaking role as we work through this transition, but we're really looking forward to hearing what everyone has to say today. So thanks.
Great. Thank you, Carrie. And also, so Ed has his screen on for a minute, but this is a way to show you some of the other folks that have been working behind the scenes from the 4 states. Michael, JT, also Jeff, Alan, if we can also, if you have a moment, just turn on your screen. And I'm mostly asking this to give the kudos to this team that's been working long and hard for many months, getting us to today. So thank you and welcome to all of you. So with these opening remarks, then I'm going to move on just to some housekeeping and logistics and the agenda. And again, I'm Deb Noodleman, part of the Kearns and West facilitation team. With me, Samantha Mason, and a number of other folks you see with their screens off are a part of our facilitation team helping the webinar run smoothly today. So we hope you all saw these materials in advance, and I'm about to walk you through high level with the agenda. You'll hear me say this a number of times, but all the materials were sent and then posted to Idaho's website. And thank you again, Mike, for helping to host and house all the meeting materials. After the meeting, the slide deck that you'll see us using will also be hosted to the website along with any of the other follow-up materials. So today, here we are in the welcome. After this, we have a short section of workshop introductions and a way to try to warm up this room. We're already at around 220 people. It's a nice big crowd. Can't wait to be back in person with you, but so grateful that you're here with us today on the webinar. And then we move into the presentation piece, where the 4 states have an opportunity to provide a high-level overview of the Columbia Basin Collaborative purpose, the refined structure, and the proposed approach. We do have a number of slides to get through. It'll probably take about 40, 45 minutes, about half of the time together, maybe a little less than half the time today. We would be grateful if you'd hold your questions till the end of the presentation. You can actually even just write down a slide number if it helps you remember where your question is. And then we have lots of time after the short stretch break for, we hope, question, answer, and robust group discussion. The interest here is for the rest of the time, which is closer to an hour and a half, is to hear from as many of you as possible about your ideas, suggestions, questions, pushback about steps to move forward in standing up the Columbia Basin Collaborative and the approach that to the greatest extent possible works for everyone and all the joint interests around the basin. We will stop on the substance around 2:45 Pacific time, leave about 10-15 minutes at the end for next steps, for wrap up, for a summary, and we'll adjourn no later than 3 o'clock Pacific time, 4 o'clock Mountain time. Okay, next slide. So we have a couple ground rules. Most of you are used to this, but they're just gentle reminders to help the meeting today be as productive and constructive as possible. First, please let's honor the agenda. We do have a lot of topics to cover, so staying on task is really helpful. Listening to each other to understand and asking questions to clarify. Think about the question, why? Why does a person say what they're saying? Why would a reasonable person ask or think or behave that way? And looking for opportunities for commonality out of that diverse interests. Next is focusing on the substance and the content. So being hard on the problem, soft on the people is the way we like to say it. This is really good, complex work that you're all here to do. So let's stay focused on how to help each other get the best results possible. Seeking common ground. So differences of opinion and conflict are actually helpful. It helps in that diversity of opinion to understand and build the strongest outcomes. And at the same time, let's look for those opportunities and name them when you see them. Provide a balance of speaking time. This one's going to be really important today with having so many people, that if you could please be kind enough to say your comments briefly. We even have a little clock to help us manage time. And then if you do hear somebody else having already said what you've said, you can do a bit of a thumbs up from the chat box, or try not to be repeating comments. So we leave as much time as possible for that diversity of opinion. And that's this last piece about if it's been said, try not to repeat it. Okay, so I just have a couple other quick housekeeping items, Sam, before we go to the next piece, which is that I do want to remind you, this is called a Zoom webinar, and some of you have just joined. Some of you may be listening in on the YouTube live stream. That's fine. The whole meeting is being recorded, and it will be posted up on the Idaho website afterwards. You can open up to the right-hand side if you want to see the participant list, and click on the left side as a panelist. Those are the people up on your screen, the presenters, and the right side if you click on the attendees, and that's all the wonderful people here in the audience with us. You can also open up your chat box and you can add things. Is the chat just for us, Samantha, for the panelists? So we use that, right, to help us manage from up here. But for all of you in the audience, you can use the Q&A box. And that's a place, as we said, you can drop in questions as we go. We'll do our best to try to fit them in. And if not, we'll do a summary afterwards. I do want to say one last piece that I'll tell you at the end, which is, as with the organizational workshop part 1, we did have a post-meeting survey. So whenever you leave the meeting and you're logging out, you'll get a link to take you to fill out a survey. And we want everyone to feel free to use that as a way to give us your feedback. We will have limited time here today during the workshop, but please, at whatever time you need to exit, whether you stay through to the end or earlier, go ahead and click on that link, and there's a great opportunity to add your input, feedback, ideas, suggestions via the post-workshop survey. Okay, I think that is all I have, except to say how excited I am to be here with all of you and helping to move this great initiative forward. So we are going to move to the next piece, which is what we like to call warming up the room. And we did a version of this last time. We were thinking, like, we miss being in the room with all of you in person. You don't get to hobnob around the coffee bar. You don't get a chance to go to lunch with each other. So here in the virtual world, we have a few techniques to try to help you get to know each other a little better and find out more about who's here. So last time we did this, and go ahead and show it, Samantha, we did a couple of word clouds that we hope you found interesting. They went into the meeting materials. And these are when you respond, the more people that say the same words, the bigger they get. So many of you have probably done these kinds of word clouds, but we wanted to warm the room up today with a chance to see a couple of these from last time. So this was a, why are you attending the workshop today? For collaboration, salmon, learning, understanding, climate change, treaty rights, fish passage, partnership, curiosity, connecting, solutions, justice, protect, communities, understanding each other, salmon recovery. So there's lots of great words in here, and we really appreciated the input. And then the next slide from last time shows a little bit about what people answered to the question of why do you hope the Columbia Basin, or what do you hope the Columbia Basin Collaborative can accomplish? And here, some of the bigger words that came out included reintroduction, abundance, solutions, dam removal, consensus, sustainability, clean energy, science focus, Snake River Dam removal, salmon economy, honoring treaties, saving salmon, abundant salmon, sustainable solutions. So lots and lots of words, and it's really impressive when you have to lean in and really look. Healthy River is in there. So thank you from the last round of input. And now we're just going to take a few minutes and do this with you again today. So if we go to the next slide, this is how it works. We're going to ask you to actually either, you can do this on your browser, on your phone, or you can use your computer. And what you want, there's two ways to do this. You could either go to www.menti.com and enter the code 4876-9618. Again, the code is 4876-9618. Or you can actually take your camera and hold it up to the screen. And just like nowadays when we go to restaurants, you just snap a picture, okay, of the QR code. You give it a second, it takes you to the website and loads you right into the Menti survey. Okay, so if you're on a phone, it should load you right into the Menti survey. If you're on your browser, put in the website and add that code. And I'm taking my time to give you each a minute to get in there. And once you're in, we'll start with the first question. You should see right on your screen, and I'll give you a clue. The first question is, what is your favorite vacation spot? This is the one we use to warm up the room. So why don't you go ahead, Sam, and we'll let that first question roll. And it's what is your favorite vacation spot, beach or mountain? Okay, and it's okay, you tap on one and you hit submit.
And I'll also just jump in here quickly. It looks like the QR code actually did change. So if you aren't at the Menti poll already, please enter this code, the 5259-9290, or you can also scan this QR code here. Apologies for that.
All right. Sorry about that, everybody. For some reason, they moved us along. So we're going to do this again. Take a second. Open Menti 5259-9290. And it should say your favorite vacation spot, beach or mountain. Just pick one for this one. Okay. And then you hit submit. So what this does, and it's kind of fun, folks, it does it real time. So 110 of you, 120 of you have already answered. The mountains are winning at this point. Again, I have a feeling some of you wish you could have said both, but we're forcing you to make a choice just so you can see how the Menti function works. We'll let it go just a minute longer. We do hope that as people are feeling safer and getting vaccinated or finding that it's okay to go back out in society again, that you are planning a safe vacation for yourself. Okay, so this was the one that got us going just so you could do the test. So now here go the rest of the questions that have to do with the workshop today. The first one, and you can click on skip to next question. And we just want to know if you were with us at the February 24th CBC organizational workshop. So it's a yes or no. So go ahead and pick one. And it looks like at this point, almost twice as many of you were with us last time. And we will tell you, as this one is still populating, we will have some slides at the beginning of the 4-state presentation that remind people of where we've been, then getting to where we're at and where we're going, so that we get that same common foundation of understanding for those of you that are joining us for the first time today. So again, looks like closer to 50 are new for the first time and closer to 100 have been here before. Okay, so thank you on that question. So we'll move on to the next question. And now on the rest of these questions, you can actually select more than one. But this question has to do with what interest do you represent in the Columbia River Basin? So you can tap on as many as represent you: tribal culture, energy, fisheries, agriculture, transportation, infrastructure, environmental, river navigation, recreation, and other. Okay, great cross-section of interests and lots of diversity of interests. We have greater numbers in fisheries and environmental, and plenty of representation from tribal culture, energy, recreation. Then we see plenty of energy again is popping up, agriculture, transportation infrastructure, river navigation. What a great cross-section. Thank you, everybody. This means a lot to the 4 states to have this much participation and diversity of representation. So we'll move on to the next question. This one has to do with sector representation. So when you think about what sector you represent, it'd be great if you could indicate, again, you can pick more than one: Columbia Basin tribes, federal government, state and local government, political or elected officials, NGOs, utilities, river users and ports, private sector, and academia. Okay, we'll give this one just another little while to populate. Really great sectors. And this part will mean a lot to us, especially as we're walking through the diagram and showing you the structure for the Columbia Basin Collaborative and all the various ways people can participate throughout the basin and at the table and in this process. Give this one just a little bit longer. Okay, so now we have a couple of word clouds that we'd like to try with you this time. And for the first one is what outcomes. So this is really when you look out into the future, what outcomes could be accomplished with a collaborative basin-wide approach. So here you can actually enter words, and you can enter up to 10 words. And so think of yourselves out into the future. And this has been a hugely successful initiative. We've accomplished everything we wished for. What is it that you've accomplished? What are some of the words that represent having made this worth the time, the effort, the resources, everything that it takes to really work in a collaborative fashion to create results that matter to people? So we'll give you a few more minutes on this one with words about outcomes. What outcomes could be accomplished with a collaborative basin-wide approach? Okay, we'll give this one a couple more minutes to populate. And the more that people use similar or the same words, the bigger the words get on the screen. And when you see the screen moving like that, it's people adding words and it changes the quantities, which then again, change the size of the words as you see more and more people align around certain phrases. This is really great, everybody. It's things like conservation, sustainability, salmon recovery, abundance, treaty fishing rights, energy solutions, energy reliability, equitable solutions, trust, restore abundant salmon, action, sustainable fisheries, remove lower snake dams, environmental justice, clean energy, orca recovery, fishing rights, healthy rivers, okay. This is really impressive, everybody. Sam, when you move to the next slide, is that finished? Can it work still afterwards?
Yep, you can still input afterwards.
Okay, all right. So if there are a few people who want to add some more words, please feel free. We're going to move on to the last question, which is, what do you think are the most important problems to address at the Columbia Basin Collaborative? So what do you think are the most important problems to address at the Columbia Basin Collaborative? This is a second word cloud. You can add up to 10 words or phrases if you'd like to. What are the problems to address? Okay, we'll give this one a minute or so to let people add their content, and thank you. Now, this is for the current tense. As we think about the next 5, 10, 20, 50 plus years of working together in the basin, what are the problems that we should be focusing on? Okay, let this one go a little bit longer, but we're starting to see, again, some words that as they get larger, that means more people have shared some of the same words or phrases. This one includes fish passage, salmon recovery, dam removal, climate change, orca recovery, optimization, equity, funding is big and bold in the middle, tribal rights, dams and dam removal, fish passage, transportation, salmon extinction, misinformation, energy reliability, economic vulnerability, lack of leadership, Snake River tribes, inaction, invasive species, equitable funding, comprehensive approach, no silver bullet, water quality, fear of change, optimization, feasibility of actions, reintroduction, viability. And again, now, as we pause on this one, thank you so much, everybody, for the hard work in entering all these words. The ones that seem to be larger in the middle, and again, all the words matter: climate change, funding, dams, salmon recovery, fish passage, equity, treaty rights, tribal rights, harvest, consensus, optimization, misinformation, water quality, and many more, predation. So this is incredible, everybody. Thank you so much. Really appreciate the effort and really had a chance to get to know you a little bit better. And as we keep saying, very much looking forward to also getting back in the room with you. These will be a part of the meeting materials, and we'll keep these and bring them with as we move forward with the overall process. So thank you again, everybody. So we're going to move on now to the presentation, and welcome back, 4 state leads. We're glad to have you with us. And it's my understanding, Mike Edmondson, I think you have the first piece. And I'm just going to remind folks, if you can hold your questions until after the presentation. And again, if you look in that lower right-hand corner, like this is slide number 11, you can write yourself a note if that helps you when we go back during discussion time. So Mike, welcome back.
Thank you, Deb. You're right. I'm going to introduce our topic today and provide a little background. I appreciate the Menti poll. I was able to scroll through the participant list, and at the time there's like 229 on it. And I mean, it's the who's who of the salmon world, such a diversity of interests. It's everybody from congressionals to fish biologists. I mean, and you only know that if you know these individuals, but with the Menti poll, everybody gets that same insight. I really appreciate the effort. And looking at that list, it does beg to talk about how we got here. And I'm going to offer a few overview slides of just how we did that. While this is a review to some, this evolution in the region and connectivity between various efforts may not be clear to all. If this is familiar to you, be patient. It's only a couple slides to set the foundation for today's discussion. And I'll move as quickly as I can. So next slide, please. So graphically, From the Columbia Basin Task Force, and really that was even predated by the situation assessment, which we may talk a little bit about, is now there's talk of an update to the situation assessment. Keep your ears peeled for information on that. From the Columbia Basin Task Force, the 4 state governors worked together to come up with the 4-state agreement. The Columbia Basin Collaborative Ad Hoc Convening Group took the governor's directives to plan for the Columbia Basin Collaborative. The Ad Hoc Convening Group consists of the reps from the 4 states that we introduced earlier, the folks that work with us and provide us input, Bonneville Power Administration, NOAA Fisheries, and an advisor to our group on tribal issues. And collectively, we've done outreach to sovereigns and stakeholders throughout the basin in order to shape our vision for this process. Next slide. The 4 governors have committed to pull our region together on this topic. They sent representatives, thinking back to how this has evolved, they sent representatives to the Columbia Basin Partnership. They maintained that effort to build a foundation from really late 2016, beginning with nominating representatives to NOAA for appointment to the Columbia Basin Partnership Task Force under MAFAC, which is NOAA's Federal Advisory Committee, through the completion of phase 2 of the partnership, which was only just last fall. From the partnership, the 4 governors agreed to a common vision that we'll share with you. We will review our purpose and make a case for the relevance of the Columbia Basin Collaborative. And I hope that you come to feel and understand that we listened to your input from our first workshop, and that has shaped the materials we're sharing today. And we're committed to moving forward with you. Next slide. So this is the vision for the Columbia Basin Collaborative that we're here to represent today and bring to reality through partnership with you. I'm going to give a second so everybody can read this. You don't need to hear my voice repeat what's on the slide. These words, as Deb says, words matter, and these are important. So please take a second and let them sink in. Thanks. I think we can move on. These are our guiding principles. We strive to be regional in scope, be focused on outcomes, to remain nimble and always opportunistic. We must be effective. We will always ensure to remain inclusive. We strive to be knowledgeable and increase the knowledge of those around us and across the region. We must be timely. Next slide. So I can't quantify the input from our last meeting with you, say the number of comments or the number of specific suggestions, but I can qualify. I can assure you that your input has guided every conversation, every meeting, every change or adaptation to our vision, our structure, and the function of the Columbia Basin Collaborative. I can share that your comments and input have generated literally hundreds of conversations, and these have helped to evolve this process that we're here to share with you today. Next slide. We aim to share our progress, show the adaptations to the conceptual working diagram that we shared in the first meeting, address some of what I would categorize being as perceived a conflict between the Columbia Basin Collaborative and various proposals being contemplated by the region. We'll share our concepts on membership, participation, and our path forward. I'll jokingly say, I'm not here today to ask you for your hard-earned money. I'm not here to ask you to sign up for anything, but maybe we are. Next slide. So there's been a lot of interest, discussion, debate, and frankly, some well-founded concern about the proposal from Idaho Congressman Mike Simpson, who represents Idaho's 2nd Congressional District. I'm talking about both regionally and even within our ad hoc convening group. As such, I wish to read these points to stay on message with the deliberations within our group and to accurately portray our view. There has been significant amount of response across the basin to the Simpson proposal as it progresses. Concurrently, the 4 states have been working to build a collective, unified, and basin-wide alignment through the Columbia Basin Collaborative that explicitly addresses the actions needed to achieve Columbia Basin Partnership quantitative and qualitative goals. Although the timing of the Columbia Basin Collaborative limits its ability to inform federal legislation this year, whether that moves forward or not, the Columbia Basin Collaborative work products and recommendations may complement and inform future legislation striving to support or achieve fish recovery while promoting growth and the resilience of our regional economy. Several key elements of Congressman Simpson's proposal will likely be a high priority for the Columbia Basin Collaborative to address and consider in the coming year. Nothing in the Columbia Basin Collaborative process prevents or obviates sovereigns or stakeholders from supporting or lobbying for state or federal legislation as they see fit. So hopefully that clarifies the relationship between what we're talking about here today and the proposal put forth by Congressman Simpson. Next, I have 4 slides to discuss the value added of the Columbia Basin Collaborative. Once again, these are well thought out statements. There's 4 of them. First of all, is to break through the implementation barriers for important actions. Now, I just want you to consider that and look at the bullets. And I'm not gonna fluff these up. These are it took a lot to organize our thoughts, to share them with you, to tell you why we think the collaborative is value added, meaningful. Let's move to the next slide. To take a regional basin-wide approach in the vein of the Columbia Basin Partnership. Not a run, not a stock, not a listed entity, whether an ESU or a DPS. This is everything, listed, non-listed, short-term, medium, long-term goals, regional. Next slide. The intention is to be a broad focused forum, broadly scoped forum, pardon me. And lastly, the power of collective voices to get results on the ground. I'd share a couple of thoughts on this. As one reads the media accounts of the various congressional proposals or rumors of alternate proposals, a few statements, some messaging from Northwest delegates comes to mind. One, that consensus-based grassroots ideas that came from collaboration could be funded and should move forward. And that was recently in the news. I mean, I think really that speaks volumes to what we're attempting to do here, what we will achieve here in terms of the Columbia Basin Collaborative. With these 4 points that we've provided to you, I would add this for your consideration. Simply stated, to the best of my knowledge, there is no group, agency, or process out there that is charged with implementing the vision, qualitative or quantitative goals of the Columbia Basin Partnership Task Force. And with that, I warmly welcome my colleague, Jim McKenna from the fine state of Oregon.
Great, thanks, Mike. That was a great job walking us through that. I think you teed it up well. I'm going to take what Mike just presented as kind of the background and what got us here today to talk about where we are with kind of the framework of the Columbia Basin Partnership. So next slide, please. So when we look at the approach for the Columbia Basin Collaborative, and I think it's important to kind of go back to one important point Mike made, and that is, looking at barriers that are out there. We want to find ways to get through those barriers and actually get some action going. And it really is focused on a collaborative, basin-wide framework approach. Collaboration being the key term there, that the reason we got over 200 people on the phone here today is, we're inviting all the right people to the table to help us find these long-standing and sustainable solutions to these issues. We want to identify the actions necessary to achieve the Columbia Basin goals, as Mike stated. So we have those numeric goals, and the the qualitative goals out of the Columbia Basin Partnership. One of the things we heard in the February meeting and in some of the subsequent comments from parties who attended that meeting is, are you only focused on the ESA species? And we say absolutely not. If you look at the Columbia Basin Partnership reports, the phase 1, phase 2 reports, they're looking at all the stocks, salmon and steelhead throughout the basin, and looking at achieving robust harvestable numbers for all those stocks. So it's not just ESA specific. We also want to assess those social, cultural, economic, and ecological considerations that were raised in the Columbia Basin Partnership report. I would urge anyone who hasn't done so already to go back and read that chapter in the phase 2 report that addresses and talks about these social, cultural, economic, and ecological issues. There's also an accompanying appendix to that. It really does a great job of laying out these considerations, the tribal considerations, the power and utility considerations, agriculture, ranching, the whole bit. And it's really worth the read. And these are going to be integrated into our assessments and our analyses as we get to the next bullet of developing recommendations to achieve those numeric goals with consideration of the social, cultural, economic, and ecological considerations. And as Mike mentioned, obviously, we want to stay nimble and opportunistic. Nimble meaning, conditions, could be changing over the next few years, both physically through climate change, but also politically. We want to be nimble and opportunistic to be reactive to those changes. And we also see that the Columbia Basin Collaborative could be an excellent tool when you consider the parties that are going to be hopefully engaging with us on this effort. You got all the right people in the basin, and it could be a fantastic forum to provide communication and education throughout the basin on the relevant issues. Next slide. So this is a very, very busy slide, and I'm going to walk through it in kind of 4 chunks. The first one I'm going to talk about is kind of what's in this tan oval. That tan oval really does represent the Columbia Basin Collaborative, the framework of the collaborative. I'm then going to step over and talk on the left-hand side, these regional sectors and caucuses, talk about that component. And then I'll talk about what's at the top of the slide, the sovereign and other regional entities, how recommendations will float up to those sovereigns and regional entities and hopefully be propelled into action. And then finally, I'll talk about what's on the right-hand side, the membership and participation on the integration recommendation group and the topic-specific groups. So there's, coming back now to the Columbia Basin Collaborative, what's in that tan bubble. We heard a lot of feedback during the February meeting, and then after the February meeting, parties continued to give us some thoughts. As Mike said, we put a lot of energy into considering those recommendations or concerns that we heard, and there's some pretty substantial changes if you were to compare this chart to what we presented in February. So, if you look in this tan bubble, there's basically 3 components. There's a box for the project team, a box for what we call the integration recommendation group, and a box for the topic-specific work groups. The project team box is really just the 4 states who have invested a lot into this effort. We want to make sure that this effort is successful as it moves forward. So that box is really the 4 states continually monitoring the progress of this effort and making sure that the skids are greased, that this thing is still over time will continue to be a value-added effort. That project team is not a team that's empowered to veto or overrule any recommendation that may come out of the recommendation group. It's strictly just to make sure that the operation is moving smoothly, that we're monitoring how scopes and assignments are assigned, and how the process is flowing. The next box down is the integration recommendation group. This is what we previously called the plenary group, but after some of the feedback in February, we had some long discussions about, well, what's this group really trying to do? And we kept coming back to the fact that that group was going to do two major tasks. One is they would take information that rolls up and recommendations that roll up from the work groups, and the work groups are issue specific. So this group, the integration team, will integrate those recommendations from an issue specific work group, say harvest, a harvest work group. The integration team or the integration group will take that information and integrate it with the other recommendations we're getting from the various work groups. So the next thing that group will do is take the final products and provide recommendations up to the sovereigns and regional entities. So therefore, we decided just to call that group the Integration Recommendation Group, because that is what it does. In terms of its function, it will basically assign tasks down to a specific work group or groups and seek or instruct that group to evaluate that issue. The work group then will be comprised of experts in that particular topic. People volunteer to be on those work groups. We don't assign, but people can volunteer to be on those specific work groups. And they will work the issue. We really expect those work groups to leverage existing data and information, not have to create their own, but look out at the best available science that's out there and report back to the integration team. The integration team will then evaluate those drafts. They may ask for further clarification, or based on how it may or may not integrate with another specific work group product, kick it back down to the work group for a bit more work. And that's why you see kind of that do loop there, where kick up to the integration recommendation group, go back down, and then come back up with a final recommendation. So that's essentially how it would work. You got the integration recommendation group assigning tasks to specific work groups, those work groups working those tasks, kicking up draft recommendations to the recommendation group. And once we get to a final recommendation, the integration team would then elevate that to the sovereigns and regional entities. If you look at the left-hand side, you'll see a couple boxes: regional and sector caucuses, and subject-specific input from regional forums. What those boxes represent, and I'll start with the regional sector and caucuses, is we fully expect that the members of the integration recommendation group are constantly in contact and coordinating with their regional sectors. An example I would use is, on the integration recommendation team, each state will have one rep. So the state of Oregon will have one rep on that integration recommendation group. Well, fully expect that one rep for the state of Oregon will be coming back to Oregon and talking to DEQ, Department of Agriculture, Oregon Department of Energy, Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, and be gaining review and insights from those agencies. So, for the state of Oregon, that's how we would work. We would expect any party that's on that integration recommendation group to be doing the same with their respective sectors. We also have a box down there for subject-specific input from regional forums. And that input could either be provided directly to the integration recommendation group or to a specific work group that is seeking particular information. So let's say a particular work group needs information on specific hydro power generation at a particular dam, or specific hatchery operations at a particular hatchery. They can go get that information, that key information, and feed their analyses. So that's what the two boxes on the left represent. So when the integration recommendation group finally gets to the point where they have a recommendation to elevate, And I think the word barrier that was used earlier is a great one. There may be existing programs aimed to achieve something, but they're just not achieving their goal. What's the barrier for them to achieve that goal? And the integration recommendation group can identify something like that and say, you know, for that particular issue, the barrier is funding. For that, or maybe for a different issue, it's going to require some legislative fix. Or maybe it just needs to be elevated as a priority to a specific implementation party. That's how we can identify what the barriers are and then provide recommendations on how to break through that barrier and get that work actually implemented. So the recommendations will roll up to the sovereigns and other regional entities. If it's a proposal to Congress, say for funding, that's where it'll go. If you look at the upper left, it might be a consideration to a regional forum or process, state, federal, tribal, international. What we see there are kind of entities that are existing and mainly multi-governmental, maybe a panel that was set up by a particular act. But that's where the recommendation will go. And on the far right, it may be a recommendation to a very specific sovereign or regional agency. You know, it may be one that says, Oregon ODFW, we recommend you do this. So, you know, depending on the issue, depending on the recommendation, it would flow likely to one of those three boxes. So that's, you know, in general, how we see the process working. The recommendations that'll come out of the integration recommendation group, we are going to work really, really hard to strive for consensus. We feel that the parties on that panel and the regional sectors that they coordinate with will have a meaningful voice at that table. It's not just a seat at the table. You have a meaningful voice. We will strive for consensus. If we do not have consensus, we will fully recognize and appreciate that minority vote, or that I shouldn't say vote. We're not going to be voting. We would strive for consensus, and if someone has a minority view, we could fully respect that, document that. That view could even be passed on as part of the recommendation that, you know, certain numbers or certain elements of the integration recommendation group recommend this, but a small subset feels differently. We could document that. But the real goal is to get the weight of all the sovereigns, NGOs, and others to help propel recommendations into action. With that, I'm going to shift over to kind of the right-hand side of the page, the membership. And it might be easiest just to go to the next slide here when we talk about membership. For the integration and recommendation group, back in February, we talked a lot about trying to control that group in a way that the numbers were manageable. And at that time, we were thinking in the 15 to 20 range. As you see here, we're now talking probably approximately 20 to 30 members, because after getting a lot of feedback from various entities, we just feel that it's probably more prudent to have a number in the 20 to 30 range. At this stage, for the integration recommendation group, we're thinking each of the 4 states would have 1 seat. So that would be a total of 4 seats for the 4 states. The Columbia Basin tribes, we have an open invitation to them to have each tribe represented. We met with them on May 20th to talk about this, and we're having continued conversations with the tribes about how best they could be represented. And so that's an ongoing conversation. The federal governments, or the federal government and the various agencies, we're thinking up to 4 seats total, and we are having continued conversation with them. The last major category are what we call stakeholders. It's kind of everyone else. And we got, at first we were looking at limiting that to a couple seats. We're now up to 8 seats for stakeholders. And the group had some long conversations about this, the ad hoc committee. And what we've done is we've broken up to 4 categories: utilities, river economies, non-tribal fisheries, and conservation. And we thought it would be prudent to offer 2 seats from each of those 4 different sectors, leave it up to those sectors to decide who they want to represent them on this integration and recommendation group. I think it's important to really stress to folks that although we're talking about the integration recommendation group here, the real work happens in those work groups. That's where the real energy is. And if you feel that you have a particular interest on a particular topic, we strongly recommend that you focus on volunteering to be on one of those work groups, because as we said, that's where the real work happens. The integration team is basically going to take the work from those various work groups and integrate them, but the real meat of the work will happen down at those work groups. One thing we're aiming for is to get people to volunteer for the work groups or identify who you want to represent your sovereign tribe or sector under the stakeholders by July 31st. You can provide that information to Samantha. We got her email address here. And once we get those names, I think we could post them on our website, hopefully by mid-August timeframe. Next slide. Collaboration, consensus, and action-oriented. As I mentioned earlier, we really want to work with parties who are truly committed to collaboration. These are complex issues and involve so many different sectors, not just the fishing communities, not just tribal rights and treaty rights, but the economy, you know, the power generation for the region, the transport of materials, agricultural and irrigation issues. And we really want to sit down and find long-lasting, sustainable solutions. And to do that, we really need people to come to the table with the spirit of collaboration. And then why consensus? Well, you know, if we're able to come to consensus on recommendations for action, those recommendations are going to be far more powerful if we have full consensus from these varied parties, states, feds, tribes, and the NGO community, utility. We will have the real weight of that recommendation and feel that we would best leverage action with that consensus. Members will strive for consensus on recommendations whenever possible, and when an individual, as I mentioned earlier, or an individual member or sector feels differently, we'll document that, that position. Next slide. This one is this the one I'm handing over to Guy? Is this?
Yes, yep.
So
I was just going to tell you.
that was the basic elements of the structure. I'm going to hand it over now to Guy Norman with the state of Washington to talk about the work groups. Guy?
Thank you, Jim. So I'm going to go through, Jim just explained the diagram and the process and how we have set up a proposed process to get to action. I think we heard from consistently feedback that people in the basin want this to be an action-oriented process, one that can move through the process to implementation as soon as possible. So what we've developed here is basically a 3-step process. One, we think we need to have a biological foundation to begin with and identify priority actions through a biological process, but using existing science and existing expertise, existing information to get there, to where we're not bogged down with trying to develop new information in order to move forward. And then the second step is assessing the feasibility of actions. And a lot of the work, the bulk of the work, we think will be done in this feasibility process to move forward to the integration recommendation group to recommend implementing actions after they deliberate on the actions that are put in front of them that are developed through these work groups. And as Jim said, the work groups, bulk of the work is expected to be done there with expertise in the specific categories that move through the issues and move action recommendations on up forward. So I will explain that in more detail in the next two slides. So this is a table developed that puts a little more detail into the process that is being considered. First of all, the first step, one of the first actions of the integration recommendation group would be to confirm the approach to identifying the priority action. So confirm what we're laying out here as a good way to do business, or are there other ways or adjustments to this proposed steps to get to actions that the integration recommendation group would like to consider. And then also assign the work tasks to the work group. Work tasks associated with the subject specific categories that we have explained earlier: predation, habitat, harvest, hydro, including blocked areas and hatcheries. And these are the same subject-specific issues or impacts that were also worked through the partnership process. So we maintain that consistency as we develop this process. So the first step, once the assignment is given to the work groups, is to go through a biological process in order to develop a matrix. And I'll explain this matrix in more detail in the next slide. Sam, I'm not quite ready for the next slide, but just want to refer to that. But basically, the matrix is based on two components. One, what is the status of the stocks? There's 27 stocks that were analyzed in the partnership process that included current abundance as well as historic abundance, and then abundance for low, medium, and high level goals that were established in the partnership process. The idea here would be to look at the abundance of each stock and then to compare that with the impact level for a particular source of impact. Also in the partnership, there was a heat map that was developed in a table in the phase 2 task force report that goes through a general estimate of impacts by impact or level of impact by impact category. So utilizing that existing science, that existing work that was conducted with the various technical expertise in the basin, utilize that to move forward and develop a matrix that would be dependent on stock status and level of impact of the various threat categories. Once that process is completed, then we would step into a confirmation by the integration recommendation group that they would approve these actions that are recommended from the work groups to go into a feasibility assessment. So the feasibility assessment would last about 4 to 6 months is the estimate. And the topic specific work groups would continue the work in terms of looking at the feasibility of a particular action. And they would also utilize the expertise from existing forums and other regional experts within the basin. And we do have a lot of forums. We have a lot of expertise that can contribute a whole lot to this feasibility assessment. The feasibility assessment would include what are the impediments to implementing an action? What are the opportunities moving forward? What's the effect on the region? Jim spoke earlier about social, cultural, economic, and ecological considerations. So those come into play while assessing a particular action. What's the implementation path? Are there existing forums where a particular action can be implemented? Do we need congressional authority or appropriations to move forward? So this is where that would occur, assessing a particular action through a widespread feasibility assessment Once that's done, then it would be passed back to the integration recommendation group, and the integration recommendation group would work through their deliberations in terms of what are their what's the path forward, and do we have consensus or do we have partial consensus and a minority report, for example, as Jim indicated, and then move forward with whatever implementation path for implementation has been recommended. So next slide, please. I'll go into a little more detail about the biological analysis. So I want to kind of qualify this this is a conceptual biological analysis, but the idea here is to be able to examine stock abundance in concert with level of impact by issue. So this kind of matrix would be developed for each impact category. And what it would do would take a look at stock status, as you can see over there on the x-axis, and impact level on the y-axis. And what we've done in this example, and I would just reiterate, this is an example. It shows about 5 stocks in the low category, and I would say that out of the 24 stocks, about half are in the low category. So this doesn't represent the true abundance. So make sure everybody knows that. This is just an example of how this biological analysis would work. So impact level, what's been assigned here in this particular example is a low, medium, high, and very high impact level. And you can see the various percentages of a population that are impacted by a particular threat, ranging from 20% for a low to greater than 50% for very high. The stock status, also based on the partnership information, low being less than 25%. There's a number of stocks in the basin that are listed, and in that category, there are also some stocks that are in the high and very high category as well that are healthy and harvestable and sort of represent stock, the path we'd like to put other stocks on in recovery. So the idea here would be to take a look at a matrix in this fashion biologically. It gets you in the ballpark of what's ailing the fish, if you will, and prompts the discussion within the work groups on what kind of actions could address those particular sources of impact. So just to explain the color code here, the red box, red color would indicate needs attention now. There's an urgent need to address low-level stocks that are having a high or very high impact in a particular category. The orange color means action warranted, and I think we would represent that certainly there should be attention given to orange stocks as well, or the orange category as well. The yellow is consider action. If you have a low stock with a low impact, in the feasibility study, it might not be the highest priority, but there may be some opportunities that you would not want to dismiss. And the blue and the green, just representing that those are not high priorities. We have stocks that are in high status or very high status with low or medium impacts, or very high status with high and very high. You may want to dig into what that really is, but they're not in the category of an immediate attention. So that is just the background in terms of this conceptual process that we put forward. The whole idea here is to link that with the process diagram and move this forward in a way that will work through high priority action recommendations. If you go back to the last slide quickly, Sam, you can see this process in total looks like it could occur in less than a year. And that's the idea, to get to recommendations in particular for high priority actions that would address the sense of urgency that we have for a number of the stocks in the basin. So I think that completes my overview, and we turn it back over to Mike.
Well, thank you, Guy. So that was a lot of process, a lot of the comments that have been shared with us since the last meeting, during the last meeting, are reflected in the changes, the additional work products, the process that's been articulated by Jim and Guy. I'm going to turn to a charter, our next steps, and then wrap us up and take us into the break. Guy, I really appreciate your ability to articulate these fine points, the details, the workflow of how a subject moves through and how to maybe prioritize those subjects, or really how the Columbia Basin Collaborative can function. So turning to a charter, some folks, especially those who may not be as process oriented, and Deb, count me in that camp, can really question, why does a group need a charter? So I'll simply offer this. Why does a ship need a rudder? Why does a marriage need vows? Why does a business need a business plan? I believe it's to provide guidance, sideboards, a foundation upon which to build a successful endeavor, in our case, a collaborative. With a charter, we create this joint commitment. That commitment provides structure, process, and expectations. Also, a measuring stick to be judged by. It creates a sense of purpose. It allows people to understand, sorry. It allows people to understand how they fit in and can meaningfully contribute. Our goal is to refine that charter, to reflect our common vision, and to join a group to adopt it and boldly move forward. Next slide. Okay, so these are the components that our ad hoc convening group will work together with you and with your input to finalize. Now, I chose the word components, and I did so implying that these are items. They're part of a larger whole, and they must work together to achieve our stated goal. More pieces may be needed. Some may be superfluous. Some may need tinkering to get just the right fit. Input, is desirable. These have to be defined. The pros needs to be constructed and fit together. Now, with the charter and moving forward in parallel with other efforts, I'd go to the next slide. What you see is one of my least favorite communication tools in existence, but that's me talking as a fish biologist. The Gantt chart to project architects, planners, and leadership, it's a powerful tool. I want to emphasize that the Gantt chart is a depiction of action through time. We are here to achieve results. We have deliverables, we have milestones, we have deadlines. Through midsummer, starting at the top, we have organizational workshops. It would be a bit more of the flavor of today's meeting, hopefully with more input, with finer products. Through the fall of this year, we'll finalize that design process, and by the onset of winter, secure funding. Concurrently, over the summer, we will finalize the composition and membership, and therefore need your request to participate, as Jim was talking about, in the Columbia Basin Collaborative no later than July 31st. Please get your name to Samantha Mason. You can also look to the Columbia Basin Collaborative website. Details will be posted there. We'll kick the collaborative off in the fall. We'll finalize the draft charter and move to adopt. Then the last 3 lines in the chart with the arrows extending to the right represent the rubber hitting the road, the work initiating, progressing, completing, and the next task beginning to repeat it as required until success is achieved through the process that Guy defined. So what's next? You know, as I stated in my introduction, in the effort to recover and bring to abundant salmon stocks in the Columbia River Basin, we face substantial challenges that may seem insurmountable by any one entity, tribe, sovereign, or agency, but we're encouraged that together we can overcome the challenges before us in this effort. This is the time, this is the tool, these are the steps necessary. We're encouraging you to participate. And as I said, again, simply stated, there's no group currently, no agency, no process out there that's charged with bringing forth the vision, the qualitative or quantitative goals of the Columbia Basin Partnership Task Force. This is the time to create it. Let's gather our tools, let's gather our resources and make this a reality for the Columbia Basin. Next, please. Now we get a stretch break.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Guy. Thank you to the 4 states for this presentation. It's very powerful and deep and complex. And as a reminder to the group, the full slide deck will be posted to the Idaho website immediately after the meeting today, as with all the rest of the materials. We're going to give you a quick 5-minute stretch break. While you're in the stretch break, please reminder, if you are watching via YouTube live stream, you have to hop over to the Zoom call. So you have to get to the Zoom link, which if you don't have it is also posted on the Idaho website. Click on that link, register, and it'll let you into the meeting. And when we come back from the stretch break, people can raise their hands and we'll start the queue for the question and answer group discussion. All right, take a quick stretch. Thanks, everybody. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. Hope you had a good stretch, took a little break, got some fresh air if that's possible. Maybe you have sunshine near you, not sure. I will say, as people are joining back on, folks have been asking some nice questions in the Q&A section. We're trying to answer those as we go along. A lot of them were more just kind of high-level questions. We are interested that as we kick off this section, that people go ahead and raise their hands and actually just verbally ask a question, you know, make a very brief statement if you need to, provide your input, suggestions, ideas, feedback on what you've heard during the presentation section. And one of them, just so I reference it, was a question about how to visit the Idaho website. I know I brought that up a bunch of times. There is a Columbia Basin Collaborative webpage, and Samantha has put both in the Q&A and the chat box the link that will take you right over to the CBC informational page. So we hope that's helpful. And as we're coming back, we're still happy to see over 200 people with us and a great collection of folks in the participant list. Lots of names that are familiar to many of us and some new faces too, and great diversity of interest with us also. So why don't we go ahead, we'll take down the stretch break signage, and then I'll just do a really quick reminder about how we run the group discussion piece. I just have a couple really quick slides. So why don't you go ahead and put up the next slide? Thank you. And we're hoping any of those folks that are on the YouTube live stream that do want to ask a question, remember to leave, come on over to the Zoom webinar, sign in, and then you'll be able to raise your hands. So just for the group discussion piece, next slide. As we join into this section with workshop participants, again, wishing we could be around a table with all of you or in a big room. We might have done some small group discussions. We might have done whiteboards. Some of you have done sticky walls where you could just put all your ideas and suggestions up on a wall. What we're going to try to do today is seek some of that balanced representation. So hoping folks that have different opinions will raise their hands, looking for that balance of representation and just, you know, both lots of people speaking and with different perspectives. And you can raise your hand to speak. And if some of you are new on this, Samantha, can they see at the bottom of the screen, they have a raise hand function, don't they, in the audience? Help me with this piece, correct. Right? I know a few people are having trouble finding out how to raise their hands. And then we are going to call on as many people as possible. Now, some of you have joined by telephone. So if you want to raise your hand, you press *9. Those of you in the Zoom webinar can find it at the bottom of your screen, raises your hand. And then we'll just call people in order. I'm going to try for about 2 minutes per person. And pending if I have lots of people, you know, at some point I will gently ask you to wrap up, and we can always have you come back at the end of the meeting if we have more time. But for now, just to try to get that balance, we'll start with a couple minutes per speaker. And then for those of you that prefer, for whatever reason, you can also type some questions into the Q&A box, and we can try to answer some of those with our 4 state reps, as well as possibly typing in an answer. You can also hit the like button in the Q&A box, and that just means you upvote it and it shows more than one person either has the same question or the same comment. And then again, I've said this at the beginning of the meeting, but just want to remind you that when you leave the meeting, you will receive a survey link that allows you to add more input at the end of the workshop, okay? So input and feedback, there are a whole bunch of questions and lots of open spaces for you to add whatever you'd like that you may not have had a chance to state here. So I think we're ready to go to the Q&A group discussion piece. And we've listed in your agenda just a short list of some of the topics that the 4 states were hoping to hear from you about. So next slide. You know, ideas and suggestions for, and you know, this is new to most of you. So what do you think about the integration and recommendations group and the topic specific work groups? Is it resonating for you? Do you have ideas and suggestions for how to improve those structures? Providing your thoughts on the approach for alignment on actions. So how do we help the joint interests all get represented? But when you're seeking alignment, does that approach make sense? A piece that Guy walked you through, kind of a step-by-step on that. And then Jim showed you the flow between the various pieces and the different parts of the overall process. Does it seem like we're helping to address your interest in the Columbia Basin Collaborative If so, explain why. If not, explain why. Just if you could help open up that box about what are your interests, do you see them being represented here? And then how do you want to offer ideas and suggestions to contribute to the success of this effort? I really appreciate Mike's in his wrap-up comments on behalf of the 4 states. This is a time and opportunity for this collaborative to sit in the basin and be a part of everybody's success. And is this resonating, this approach? How do you want to help improve on it? What ideas and suggestions do you want to offer? And then others, just what else? What else do you want to say, contribute, push back on, or join in on? So that's the list. And we're going to take the slides off the screen if we could, and go ahead and start in on the questions. And I do have 4 hands up, and I'm going to introduce at the beginning and say a name and apologize in advance if I mispronounce it. But when you speak, we're going to take you off mute. Could you please tell us your first and last name and any affiliation you have, and then we'll go ahead and start. Okay, so Kurt Miller, we'll have you first. Go ahead.
Hi, great. Thank you so much, Deb. And my name is Kurt Miller. I'm the Executive Director for Northwest River Partners here in Vancouver, Washington. I want to thank you guys, everyone who showed up today, and then those who are attending, for all the hard work that's obviously gone into this effort. And I got to see an earlier draft of this, and months, and probably a few months ago. It's hard to remember everything, but it's clear that you guys have done so much work just since that time to try to help this process become smooth and effective. So thank you for that. I do want to share something that I am a little bit alarmed with in looking at the structure, and it's not about the recommendation group. It's really about the ability of the work groups to essentially self-select. I think that it does seem like it leads to the potential challenges that they saw, like in the Orca Task Force in Washington State, that really kind of devolved into a much more political effort than really a scientific effort. And so, if groups are, if I understand it right, and I'd love clarification on it, but if groups are allowed just to self-select, then it could just be kind of a tyranny of the majority instead of really looking at the science that's out there. And one thing, for instance, I would use as an example is that around the issue of delayed mortality. If you look at the NOAA fisheries science, it says delayed mortality has a very negligible effect on salmon returns. If you look at the Fish Passage Center science, it shows a very big effect. And so how are those, how do you select which science you're going to be looking at as part of this biological discussion? So anyway, I think that's important. I'm afraid of a really biased potential outcome if the groups are allowed to self-select. And I think the Columbia Basin Collaborative should actually probably handpick people rather than just make it a free-for-all. So that's my comments and my question. Thanks so much.
Okay, great. Well, we're glad to have you with us, and thank you. Anybody 4 states thoughts on this?
I'd like to nominate Guy to answer.
Looks like Guy just went off mute. So go ahead, Guy.
It took me a while to find the mute button. I don't know why, but so yeah, thanks for your comments, Kurt. And certainly, I think as we work through the work groups and the biological analysis, we're going to want that to be unbiased and transparent, and making sure that in that process we described that we're all working with the same information. And I think when we get into the feasibility analysis, that may be where we have diverse input from various interests, as well as technical input and input from expertise from existing forums. So I think I hear what you're saying, and I think we'll try and keep an eye on, make sure that the biological process is unbiased and moves forward objectively. And the idea is an objective analysis, and then move into a feasibility assessment that considers all the different perspectives and ramifications of a particular action.
Thank you on that, Guy. And I want to tell our audience, I do have some more hands up, but I also have more questions in the question and answer box. And so panelists, if you don't mind, I'm going to toggle back and forth. And if I could, I'd like to queue up Kathleen George, if I'm pronouncing your name right. And 4 states, I'll read it out loud so everybody hears it and then ask if one of you wants to pick the question. So she asks, for the tribal nation group, will the decisions coming to this group be policy decisions? Would like to understand if elected leaders or technical or policy staff are the right people for the tribal nations group.
I guess I did find
Thank
the mute button a little faster that time, but if I understand the question, it was, where what particular areas did the tribal representatives fit? And I think it's all areas in my mind. We've got the integration recommendation group that will consider recommendation, make assignments, and deliberate on implementation moving forward. But then, of course, we have technical expertise, widespread technical expertise within our tribal governments that we think certainly are a major piece of this and a vital part of success. So I guess my answer is all aspects of this.
Mm-hmm. And so maybe, oh, go ahead, Jim. Yep, go ahead.
No, that I was just going to agree with Guy on that point.
Okay. Yep. And so depending on which box you're in, if you will, Jim, when I was thinking about you kind of moving us around the diagram, you'd be responding to Kathleen that you'd be designating per those tasks, right? So for the working group, you want the technical folks up in the implementation recommendations, maybe policy folks, and in caucus, maybe a mixture of all, depending on, again, how people choose to organize themselves.
Yeah, we want to provide an opportunity, for the sovereign tribes and others to decide upon themselves where they could best be most influential. But what I would stress is that the integration and recommendation team, we're looking for folks who can really integrate information and look at issues basin-wide and kind of a broad vision there. And that might be maybe more in the policy range and in the issue-specific groups. That's where you're really getting into the meat of particular information. And the question was in regards to tribes. Yes, as Guy said, there are tribal experts in power. There's tribal experts in hatcheries. They're welcome to be part of any of those particular subgroups.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Jim. So I'm going to go next to the next hand that's up, and that's Terry Wright. If you want to go ahead and say hello, introduce yourself. Thank you.
Hey, Terry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I was still muted. This is Terry Wright. I'm an orca salmon activist advocate, and I want to thank you all for having these meetings for us to attend. I appreciate your work. There is an immediate concern, though, that might be out of your scope, and I'm just wondering if the group has any ability to get in and fix some problems sooner rather than later, because if we wait until you kick off, which is in December, we may not have salmon to save. And what I'm referring to is the temperature. In 2015, we had a die-off of salmon because of the heat wave and the hot waters, and it looks like this summer will be shaping up to be the same. So is there anything you guys can do immediately to fix the temperature in the Snake and Columbia Basin rivers? Thank you.
So I unmuted. That's a good question. Point for Sam really quick. I was trying to answer a question in the chat box regarding the role of council. Somebody asked Anne being tasked with quote fish recovery, and somehow I lost it. So maybe we can put that in the materials at the end, or maybe punt that over to Guy to answer here in a second, or Jeff being council members.
Yep. Yeah, I'll help on that. Go ahead.
Thanks. to the question, at least from the standpoint of Idaho stocks, one in 2015 that was especially challenging was Idaho sockeye. The time of the Stanley Basin sockeye migration through the lower Snake and into Idaho coincides with some of the warmest water temperatures you see. We had some emergency actions taken. We have a plan of action for moving that specific and only that specific stock under a very certain set of identified conditions. And it's a trap and haul. We can make use of the hydro system to facilitate that action. We've also made changes. The changes have also been affected to the hydro system to alleviate some of the problems with adult passage timing. I don't think there's a universal answer for every stock in the system. I just give one example, and the other folks that have a lot of main stem experience like to offer a chance to jump in.
I'm going to channel something you, Mike, have said in internal meetings over the last couple of months. It would have been ideal if we all had sat down and had this conversation 5 years ago and had this thing up and running. We recognize that there are time critical issues like was just raised by Terry in that question, but we can only do what we can do right now. I think the idea is let's get this thing up and running as fast as possible, and we really want to stress the importance of everybody, hopefully getting everybody on board with this so we can attack those difficult issues.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you both. And thank you for the question, Terry. Appreciate it. I'm going to go next to Joe Lucas. Hello and welcome.
Hello, I'm Joe Lucas, General Manager of Western Montana G&T and prior member of the Columbia Basin Partnership. I've got a number of process questions, so maybe Deb will help with those, or if they're too difficult, I'm sure the panel can help out too. So first off, with names previously submitted, ahead of the February initial kickoff, and now the July 31st deadline, do you want those resubmitted again? First question. Second question, what happens with the names and the naming of integration team members, after you receive the submissions by July 31st? And finally, is there I know Mike talked about the Gantt chart, but is there a firm plan on when the group would be convened? Thank you.
So I'll do the simple one first, and then I may have the team help with the rest of them. So for the simple one, Joe, it would be easiest just to resubmit it again, just to be safe. We probably, people have probably spoken to certain people, but why don't we officially open the door today and give people this time to send it through to Samantha, which makes sure we can help funnel it back to the team. Okay, so anybody that has names for nominations. And then to the others from the states, do you want to share a little bit about your thoughts so far on how to move through the membership process, representation process? I mean, I can say some more, but somebody else want to jump in? Yeah.
Yeah, I'll let the other partners chime in as well. I think we were pretty clear in the presentation that, for the integration recommendation team, we're going to have each of the 4 states promote who they feel should take the seat for their respective state. We're looking for the federal agencies to finalize their conversations and give us the names that they're proposing. For the sovereign tribes, we've got an open invitation to them and an ongoing conversation. And so we'll continue to talk to them. But I think the game plan is to have that wrapped up by the end of July, so we can move forward. For the stakeholders, we outline those 4 categories and 2 seats each, but we're really looking at those sectors to caucus amongst themselves and promote to us who they feel are the right folks to sit on that integration team. Yeah, thank you. And the only thing, this is Deb again, that I
probably help with, you all know this, if you know me, is to underpromise and overperform. And so going with your third question, Joe, about when are you going to be standing up the collaborative, and it's sometime in the fall, and just, you know, the logistics of depending how many names come in for the working groups, depending how many, if it's an easy dropping in, like you just said, to the seats, Jim, it can happen pretty efficiently, but I want to leave that cushion space for all of you. You know, it may take some talking back and forth. It may take a little more work over the summer months, if that's fair to say.
And thank you, Deb and group. If I may, one quick follow-up. Are you planning for alternates?
I don't think it's been decided yet. I think, is that fair to say? I think there's a draft charter, but, you know, like Mike said, the group needs to decide for itself. You know, many groups like to have alternates as a way to cover and, you know, have two people that can fill the seat. Other groups don't like it, you know, because I think it's hard to keep the information flow. I don't think it's decided at this point. Fair to say?
Fair. It's a little early.
Yeah, I think the group's going to decide itself, Joe. Good question, though. Yeah.
All right, thanks so much.
Yep, thank you for being with us today. So I'm going to drop back to the chat box for a second. Mike, we found the one that by mistake went into the answered bucket. It came from Heather Nicholson. Isn't the Northwest Power and Conservation Council tasked with recovering fish in the basin? Before the break, I heard it noted that this collaborative is the only group tasked with the restoration. Could you clarify, please? Thank you. Guy, what do you think?
Well, I see member Jeff Allen is on as well. So Jeff, you or I, you could go first if you like.
Sure, and I'll probably say the exact same thing Guy was thinking of, but our mission at the council is to mitigate for the existing hydropower, well, basically the entire energy producing system in the region. Big difference between mitigate and fully recover. And not the first time we've been asked this, but we fund tons of habitat work, we fund hatcheries, we fund other efforts, but our primary effort is mitigation, which, as everyone knows, is not quite all the way to a full-blown recovery. Guy, what'd I miss?
I think you nailed it. I think the main point is that, you know, the focus of the council by congressional act is to mitigate for the federal hydro system. And certainly it's one of the existing forums. It's key for advancing, you know, 7 goals. But there are a number of forums that cross the various issues, both in the basin and in the marine waters. And so I think with this process, we're trying to tap into all those processes, both in terms of their expertise and potential implementation paths, you know, as we come up with our recommendations.
Hey, Guy, I'd like to
Go ahead, Mike.
I'd just like to leverage it since I'm the one that made the statement and they repeated the statement at the end. Partially, it would help to understand or to share, what the Columbia Basin Partnership did. And so for those who haven't read the documents, reviewed the proceedings, or participated, we have a lot of alumni here with us today. Is they set qualitative and quantitative goals for all the stocks in the Columbia Basin. And those very broadly fell into 3 categories for the quantitative goals. Well, actually for both, but short, medium, and long term. The way the question was phrased talks to recovery, and recovery levels for those stocks that are listed are the short-term goals. And when I'm saying that there's no one entity responsible for producing the vision of the Columbia Basin Partnership, I think that's very accurate to say. The council is responsible for mitigation as described by members Norman and Allen. NOAA Fisheries in the states are here for working to recovery. You know, we have recovery plans. The action agencies that operate the hydro system and the NEPA process and biological opinion that goes with that is to avoid jeopardy of operating the hydro system. It's not to even get to recovery. It's about that action. So when you look holistically at what was said in the partnership, look, it's not TMT, it's not REOG, it's not the council, it's not NOAA, it's not, see, there's so many, it's not, this is why we need what we're proposing. it fits the bill. Jim?
You hit the nail on the head. That's exactly what I was going to say. Those Columbia Basin Partnership goals are short, medium, long term. The short ones, as Mike said, recovery. We're looking at more robust and harvestable numbers, much higher than that. So it goes beyond the charters, as Mike said, of those particular entities.
Thank you, everybody, on this, and thank you for the question. So I'm going to go back to the participant list. David Bain, I see your hand up. If you want to go and head off mute and introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm David Bain. I'm Chief Scientist for Orca Conservancy. And I wanted to ask about the conceptual model about addressing impacts on specific salmon stocks. And do you have plans to do a similar model for how addressing those impacts would affect southern resident killer whales? So, for example, a big increase in a small stock may not affect the whales a lot. A big increase in a big stock would affect the whales, but probably not help the salmon that much. So I'm wondering how you're dealing with that when you're aligning priorities.
I guess that's question addresses the presentation that I made relative to the biological analysis. And I mean, the focus is the combination of stock status and impact level. But I think my answer to that would be in the feasibility analysis. Part of that would be social, cultural, economic, and ecological considerations associated with particular actions. So orcas fit into the ecological consideration. So I think the biological process that we're laying out does look at stock status and various impacts levels of the various sources of impact, but the feasibility analysis would get into the details, including ecological details.
I think that's a great answer. Bringing up another concept from Columbia Basin Partnership is what we called SKI, the social, cultural, ecological aspects of it. There's another thought I was starting to have, and we could have this discussion with NOAA. It seems like every biological opinion we're receiving for actions in Idaho, especially those involving water, while we may be consulting for, say, spring, summer Chinook or for steelhead, we're getting opinions, jeopardy, not likely to adversely affect, depending on the outcome of the opinion, on southern resident killer whales. So that tells me there's an informed process by which to evaluate an action. And I think you could apply a framework from that process or a similar process to get some insight into a particular suite of actions affecting a stock in question and how that would relate to the southern resident question.
Great. Thank you all for the answers. Thank you for the question. I am going to go back over to the Q&A box. I will say we've taken a couple of questions on orcas. I would appreciate if people have similar questions, if you could pause or put your hand down to let folks with different kinds of questions get into the queue, just to help us manage for diversity of interest. And I am in the chat. Sorry, I have to scroll back up. So Rob Masanis asks, how and where will the integration of hydrohabitat, harvest, hatchery, and predation control actions happen in this process? So how and where will the integration of hydrohabitat, harvest, hatchery, and predation control actions happen in this process? Who wants to jump in on that one?
I'll give it a start. I mean, guys, if you'd like to go, Jim.
Okay. I was just going to chime in. I think that's the exact role of the integration panel, that we would have the individual work groups looking at those components and then integrate that information at the integration level, possibly see whether additional analyses are necessary to support it, but that's where the integration takes place.
I could give a different take on that. I don't disagree with Jim's answer, but I think that how to do it would be a task for its own work group, then they would come back to the integration group with a number of options, how to best do it, when to best do it. And then that group would then take that up. I think that needs a good amount of thought, Rob. It's also a theme. We've talked about it. You've brought this up quite consistently within, the partnership. And I agree with you. It needs to be taken on, but I don't have an answer. I think that we need to examine it and come up with the correct approach.
And I agree. And I think, what we've set out here is we think it makes sense to concentrate on significant sources of impact as getting us in the ballpark in terms of addressing those impacts and meaningful actions to move the bar towards the partnership goals for salmon. But I think there's a recognition also that there's a connection between the various sources of impact and how they affect particular stocks. And so I think we need to add or, keep in mind as we're concentrating on specific sources of impact, we also got to be able to kind of have an understanding of how they coordinate and how they work with each other in terms of moving the bar for fish. So I think it's a good question, Rob, and I think what you're hearing from us is we think it's important as well, and I think we'll be looking for input along the way in terms of how we set that up.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you for state reps. I'm going to go back to the participant list, and so Chair Brigham, hello and welcome. Do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Welcome.
I'm Board of Trustees Chair. And first of all, there's a lot of work. There's a lot of common goals, which I think are good. But at the same time, I'm wondering, there are legislative barriers, state and federal. So those are some of the things you're going to have to look at. Technical differences, biological differences. I mean, when we first started, Guy and I, Ed, we know that depending on which view people get their technical information, sometimes view a political decision, not a resource decision. And so it's going to be really important to focus on the resources, not a political decision. I guess it's also important to determine how do you get a common biological position. Like I said, we know that there are differences. Also, linkages. There are a number of people who are trying to do exactly what you guys are doing, but they're doing it outside of this process, doing their own process. And so how do you intend to link to the other efforts or activities that are ongoing to rebuild Columbia River salmon stocks? And also, as you know, tribes has viewed salmon in the circle of life. And so when you look at salmon, you're not looking at just salmon passage, you're looking at salmon water quality, quantity, temperature, all of those things. So how do you intend to link that as well? There's a lot of things out there that the tribes have been working on for decades. And we're making some progress, but not fast enough to do what we want to do to protect our tribal treaty rights. And our treaty rights not only benefit the tribes in the Pacific Northwest, but everybody in the Pacific Northwest. And that's what we're always trying to focus on as well. That's it. You got all the answers?
Thank you, Kat. Really eloquent. Who wants to respond? I think Guy, go ahead.
Well, thanks, Chair Brigham, and I'm gonna call you Kat because we've worked together for so long. Recognize. The tribes and the treaty rights and what the tribes stand for in terms of recovering salmon are key to this whole, I think, process. And in terms of legislative barriers and other barriers, in existing forums, existing processes. What we're envisioning is the weight of the region in terms of getting behind particular actions is the key. And certainly the tribes are a huge part of that and a major key in making it happen. So a lot of other forums, as you mentioned, a lot of other efforts. We're trying to kind of bring it all together here and move forward with you know, a bunch of momentum in terms of the region wanting to accomplish these goals.
And biological differences. I mean, as I stated before, you and I have been through it where we have seen technical positions developed to support technical or policy positions, not resource. So how are you going to assure that the biological information is looking at the resource, not political positions?
And I would say with your help.
Okay.
Well, and this is Deb, and it's, oh, go ahead, Jim. Of course, go ahead, Jim.
Well,
Yes.
I think Guy's comment there is critical. This is not the 4 states effort. What we're saying is, Chair Brigham, that we're inviting the tribes to be not only seated at that integration and recommendation table, but to have a meaningful voice there. And both at that table and at the work groups. And if there are efforts that the Northwest tribes are trying to implement and are hitting some type of hurdle to actually get that effort done, this could be a great opportunity to get the backing of the states, the federal entities, and these NGO parties to back you in promoting a recommendation, you know, whether it's an issue that there isn't enough funding for that effort, or that you need some type of legislative fix for it. You know, we're trying to find those barriers to the tribes being successful and for other existing efforts to be successful.
Well, then I think it's important that, you know, if you're looking at the tribes really participation, that the tribes, and I don't think 15 tribes or all of the Columbia River tribes should be in the oversight committee, but you should have at least some of the tribes, tribal representative, 2 or 3, whatever, at that oversight level to make sure that, you know, this is a tribal state initiative, not just the state. Because quite frankly, we trusted you guys before and we're not there. And so we need to have some assurances that this is a tribal state initiative, and making sure that the federal government is there too, because they have a federal trust responsibility to the tribes to live up to those treaty rights. And I don't see anything in here about habitat, you know, so, and I know you're saying, you know, everything needs to be involved, but like I said before, when we look at salmon, we look at the circle of life. Yeah. And so when you're looking at salmon, you also have to look at the habitat. And that includes forest management, that includes the farmers. And we're not trying to get them out of business. We're just trying to make sure that they're managing in a way to protect all of our natural resources. That's all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Powerful perspective and really important. Thank you so much for being here and for sharing it. I am going to go to one more on the participant list with a hand up. So it's Shari Tarantino. Hello and welcome.
Hi, thank you. I know this is the elephant in the room, and I've heard other people talking, but for those of us invested in southern resident killer whale recovery, which is a critically endangered population of just 75 members total, and a population which we know historically relies heavily on the Columbia River salmon based on tagging data from NMFS NOAA, please offer specific suggestions on how NGOs can proceed accordingly towards southern resident killer whale recovery, and yet still collaborate in this process to ensure southern resident killer whales continue to have a large voice at the table. Thank you.
Thank you.
Come on, you guys. We need you. What can we do to assist this? We've got a population that is critically endangered, and the Columbia River is vital to their survival. If I'm speaking out of turn and I'm not correct to the best available science, please tell me. But if you can't do that, what can we do to ensure that NGOs on the orca side and the salmon side can work together collaboratively with you to ensure this population's success and survival?
Well, Guy, do you want to take that one? I was just going to say, I think that's exactly what we're asking today, is for these parties to step forward and contribute, because although we are looking at achieving the numeric goals for salmon and steelhead throughout the basin, we're also considering all the other elements, the social, cultural, economic, and ecological elements that play into that as well, which includes the fact that they are an important food source for orca. So we would want folks with that perspective at the table.
So then how do we at Orca Conservancy become part of that? Who do I reach out to ensure that Dr. Bain, who spoke previously, is our chief scientist? I'm the executive director. What can we do to have a seat at that table? How do we contact you? Like, what do we need to do? What are the steps?
I think it's sending an email to Sam. Samantha put her email address in the chat room for folks who are looking to participate at on particular work groups. I would say that that would be the most expedient way to do it. It's just provide your name.
No, that's fair. And I appreciate that. And I will, Sam, I'll reach out to you. I'll copy Dave on the email. And if you could just add us to the list and let us know how we can help. Thank you so much for all you guys are doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Appreciate it very much. I'm going to keep going down the list of participants with their hands up. So Liz Hamilton, welcome. Can you hear us, Liz?
There we go.
There you go. All right. Hello. Good afternoon.
Yeah, I just got the unmute button. Thank you. Appreciate all the work that's been done here. I've had the honor of working with many of you and probably many of the participants for decades on some of these thorny issues, most recently through the Columbia Basin Partnership. But I want to say respectfully that I'm really pretty scared right now. I mean, the science is not the problem. We have decades of empirical data that proves that these fish are sensitive to the hydrosystem, both from passage issues and the temperature issues that arise from having all these reservoirs. The real problem is politics and funding. And so here we are in this urgent situation for salmon, urgent situation for orca, and we have an urgent need for money. And there's a remarkable window that we have this year to secure funding in 2021 that may close quickly and may never present itself again. And politics are so often, so usually invested in the status quo. I need to express this worry that setting up an admirable process that can't begin to deal with how to get the funding and how to create the political atmosphere till the end of the year, we may lose this this moment, this lightning in a bottle, I think that Representative Simpson expressed with the urgency and the opportunities that 2021 present. And so I guess I'd like to hear we, and I hope to help you in any way and continue helping in any way. How are we going to adapt and work to not lose this opportunity that 2021 presents? Because I think it's a once in a lifetime moment, and I'm very fearful we're going to blow it.
Mike looked like he was off mute on that one. Mike,
Oh, I never remuted. You can't. No, Liz, that's a good topic. And as I listened to your question, I thought mostly about the slide we put in,
Yeah.
talking about our views on Representative Simpson's proposal. So one, I would stick to that. Two, and part of that is that nothing here is precluding anybody from pursuing other approaches. I think that Jim alluded to something that I've said in our planning meetings many times. I would say that had the Columbia Basin Collaborative, well, even going back to the situation assessment, if the whole timeline from assessment to partnership to the letter, if this had all been reversed in time, 5, 6, 7 years, and this had been up and running, and we had a pile of ideas that were built through consensus, ready to go, then the Northwest delegation could pick it up and run with it. But as far as 2021 being lightning in a bottle, I know that on the participant list, there are individuals that would disagree with that would say 2021 may not even have an infrastructure bill. We have to be nimble and ready, and like was on the slide, to pursue those opportunities. I mean, I'll throw out a couple other ideas. Why don't we start lobbying to put more money in the Mitchell Act? Why don't we start lobbying to put more money in the Pacific Coast Salmon Recovery Fund? These are existing programs that are well administered and tightly run, that we could get a lot of results on the ground without new legislation. I mean, that's something that we could do right now. So let's do both. You know, we're here to build this collaborative process. Maybe our timing is actually good because there's stuff around the corner that we haven't envisioned yet, and we will have this to work through those issues as they come up in the future. That's the other thing I was thinking about, Liz, with your thoughtful question.
And Deb, if I may, thank you, Mike, for that. I did see the slide and catch your drift of what you said there. I just am concerned about this well-formed, well-intentioned process becoming, I don't know, how do I say this? Another excuse for status quo. That's all. I mean, and it's not about the work you've done or the intentions or how good it is. It's about political inertia. And I want this great work to not be contributing to that.
A cautionary note.
Yes.
Hear you.
Yeah. And Liz, you know, I could say, you know, on behalf of my boss, Governor Brown, she's not interested in the status quo. You know, she wants to see action. But, you know, as we stated earlier, there's nothing in, you know, our efforts to build this process, there's nothing that is precluding or preventing anybody from stepping forward and promoting any issue. You know, my understanding is that Senator Simpson has shifted his focus from getting the full kit and caboodle this year to getting the funding, just the funding this year. Well, if he's successful there, a lot of the work that this collaborative is planning to do could help feed some of the open questions that people have posed to Simpson as to, you know, you have to answer these questions before, you know, you can move forward. So if he's successful getting funding this year and we're successful maybe answering some of those very key questions, then we're in a good place a year from now.
Yes.
I just don't want to portray this as a one or the other option for the basin. I think we need to keep our eyes open and pursue every opportunity we've got, both inside and outside of the collaborative, to try and solve these very difficult issues.
I do appreciate that.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you for being with us, and thank you, state reps, for your thoughtful answers. I do want to note there's some great questions here in the Q&A box, and some of them are longer, and so I might grab a couple shorter ones, and then I'll come back to the hand raise section. There is one from Nancy Hirsch that says, what will be the forcing function for the integration panel to make hard decisions when there is not consensus? What will be the forcing function for the integration panel to make the hard decisions when there isn't consensus?
Well, I'm going to start. I mean, we talk about this, but no conclusion has been reached. I think that we need to get the folks together. We need to finish the charter. I mean, literally, that should be something that's in the charter. When it comes down to brass tacks, what happens? You know, do we throw some horseshoes? Does somebody pick up the tab? I mean, I don't know how we get there. You know, let the process people give us some ideas. You know, we can look at some other models, and then we'll make the decision that fits our group. I like horseshoes.
I think another option that's out there, I like horseshoes too, but another option that's out there, I think part of the key to the success of the Columbia Basin Partnership Task Force was the facilitation effort. And one of the options for this group is to either have an executive director or some form of facilitator that is really helping manage the conversation and keeping the group focused on striving for consensus and meeting schedules and deadlines. So that's another angle.
So I'd rather shoot free throws than horseshoes. I think I'd have a better chance. But just another thing to keep in mind, I think those are all really good answers, that good facilitator, charter, in terms of how we deal with, you know, striving for consensus. And I just emphasize strive for consensus. And if we don't reach full consensus, I think built into this is the idea that the more the region we have on board for a particular action, the more strength there is with the appropriate authorities to move forward. And but there's nothing in this process, the diagram that Jim represented. All sovereigns, all entities have the opportunity to move the direction that they prefer to go with a particular action. So just keeping that in mind, ideas, consensus, need to have a good process to get there. But you know, we maintain sovereign authority and decision making that is unique to each particular entity.
Yeah, really important. Great question and great answers. And that piece about the retaining decision-making authority, that integration recommendations team does just that. It makes recommendations. Now, consensus recommendations have a powerful messaging across the basin. It can have a way of rippling out in a way of saying you have, you know, these states, federal, tribal sovereigns, and a cross-section of NGOs all represented at this table. And if there is consensus, that's saying a lot to people. And if there isn't consensus, then you figure out what to do with it. But they are recommendations that then can be taken out to be implemented. So thank you on that one, everybody. I want to go one more out of the Q&A section. So Kaj Matheson asks, how does a stock of salmon that is extirpated in blocked areas fit into the matrix that was presented earlier? So how does a stock of salmon that is extirpated in blocked areas fit into the matrix that was presented earlier?
So I guess that's my question to answer. Built into the stock status associated with the partnership work is these populations that are extirpated that were in blocked areas, and there are goals for those populations. So there's a recognition that they would fit into the low status, obviously, in that biological matrix. And then there's a recognition also that there's habitat components, there's predation components, and there's blocked area associated with hydro components in terms of the impact levels associated with the blocked areas. So I would just say that they're built in. I think they're as we would work through that biological analysis, there'd have to be eyes wide open that there is a non-passage blocked area situation associated with those stocks, and that is just part of what's the feasibility process to address that.
Hope that helped with that one, and thank you so much, Guy. I'm going to go back to the participant list and call next on John Marsh. Hello, John. If you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and any affiliation.
Yeah, thanks, Deb. John Marsh with the Cowlitz Indian Tribe, and I'll try to keep this under 2 minutes. First, I have some thoughts. If nothing else, I want to just get on the record, if there is a record, but basically it's for you folks to think about. Before I do that, I wanted to say that I'm really impressed with how far this has gotten so far, and I'm very supportive for a basin-wide watershed approach to these issues. So the thoughts, the sovereign participation process that many of us were involved in was, in my view, very successful. And my thoughts are they're going to all be related in some way, but I'm just going to say them individually. And I'm sure you've looked at that. You've looked at the sovereign participation process for the Columbia River Treaty, and hopefully you've put together in this process the positives and addressed the negatives. And one of the negatives, of course, was non-sovereigns weren't that involved for various reasons, and you've tried to address that. I do have a question about what if all the interest and sovereigns, especially the sovereigns, don't participate. They say, well, I'm not going to participate. And I don't really want answers to these right now. I just want to make sure that you're available, that they're out there and we're talking about them. And the Columbia Basin is a watershed. And you haven't mentioned the Canadian portion of the watershed. And I know there's political and legal reasons for that. But at the same time, I think that needs to be out in the open. We ought to talk about that and how the CBC would work with that. Funding's a big issue. You've talked about funding, and we're going to have to all work together to find funding. Funding of individual entities, whether they be sovereigns or non-sovereigns, is a big deal. Cowlitz Indian Tribe is not rich. We all have full-time jobs. This brings value to what we do, but we're going to have to figure out, if we do participate, how we do that, because it's not going to be cheap. Your schedule looks good to me in terms of, let's get going, but I have really no idea how you're ever going to meet that. And I don't want to be a downer about that, but boy, I encourage you to continue down that road and to help us all meet that schedule, because it's going to be very hard. That's the Gantt chart that Mike was talking about. One thing about the Gantt chart too is the process seemed to end in 2022, and I'm hoping that isn't the intent, that this will be if getting this going will help us all. It ought to be an ongoing kind of a endeavor. And I want to applaud you on the unanimous, what you're talking about using, that will strive for being unanimous, because there's a number of us, especially the tribes, that won't participate if that's not how we operate. We're not going to vote and be turned down on our rights and on the responsibilities of the various federal and state and other entities to us. And I'll just note that last Saturday, we had a new tribal chair elected, Dave Barnett at Cowlitz Indian Tribe. And so we will do our best to meet your July 31st deadline. But leadership has to take the lead in this, and they will make the decisions. So we're going to do our best. Thank you. I appreciate all your hard work.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for speaking up. And all your questions and thoughts and good guidance is being duly noted. So thank you, John. Anything else? 4 states. I was going to move on. And so you let me know if you want to say more, but I am going to watch the time, everybody. We're on the back half hour of our session together. And I just want to say there are a lot of awesome questions here in the Q&A, and we'll make sure that for the ones we can't get to today, some of them are a little longer and more complex, that the team's going to work hard to get some answers drafted, and then we'll post that full document also to the Idaho CBC website. And then for those of you that happen to stop in later, don't forget you can add more into the survey as we wrap up. So I'm gonna next move to, I want to get these last 2 of the hands up. So David Moskowitz and then also Rick Mogren. So go ahead, Dave.
Well, thank you very much. This is David Moskowitz with the Conservation Angler. Appreciate the opportunity and have also to see the hard work that's been done since the February meeting. I really appreciated Chair Brigham's remarks, which I think were very holistic, and we support that. I think that the most troubling, difficult part of this is thinking about how will this entity, add value, and how will it coordinate and implement, or not coordinate and integrate with the existing forums, which have been in place for a long time. And some of the participants have been involved in this for quite a long time. And I think my first exposure to was during the Hatfield Salmon Summit in 1991. And, here we are with basically mostly lower runs, and we've expended a lot of money. And I think that trying to figure out the management and the accountability for action are our greatest concerns for the success of this kind of effort. And I think there were some comments in the chat that I think were apropos, in that we're looking at land use decisions made by counties in 4 states. We're talking about water decisions made by 4 states. We're talking about federal land management agencies that take action on grazing or mining or forestry, road building. And these things have real effects on wild stocks of various levels of health or decline. And those things all add up in the end. So how will, and maybe I don't think it's really an answerable question right today, but I think that it's very key for this group to determine how are you going to take the recommendations into action, and then actually monitor and enforce the implementation of actions that are actually put underway. And I know that's probably something you don't want to talk about right now. It's not really answerable, but I think it's critical to how you're organized to be able to create that connective tissue to the on the ground management decisions. And lastly, I just want to reiterate, because I think a lot of times there's not a focus on this, but we hope that the focus of these recommendations and actions will be on wild salmon and steelhead, not the collective salmon and steelhead. The wild fish are best adapted to survive climate change and our efforts to recover them. And we hope that that will be the focus, because oftentimes expenditures from whether it's Mitchell Act or Council or BPA actions, it's focused on hatcheries. And that's a limiting factor. So I think it depresses our ability to actually achieve progress to recovery. We look forward to staying engaged. We appreciate the hard work of each of the sovereigns. We look forward to the tribes taking their place at the table, and I hope that we can contribute as a nonprofit. But thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, David, for your efforts and your words. Anybody on this one?
So, yeah, Deb, I'll just step in. And David, you bring up a good point about integration with existing forums. And I think one of the key parts of the process we described is that utilizing the expertise and the knowledge of existing authorities, existing forums to move through to implementation. I think existing forums are key to understanding, what's possible and how to do it. And so I think that's part of the process, and also they're key to implementing particular actions. So they have to be funneled through the correct authority in order to get it done. So appreciate that, and I think we're working on that, and we do consider that certainly a key part of our process.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is Deb, and I do want to reflect, as I was listening to both David and a few other people talked about linkages and local use and the connective tissue, if you will, of all the different activities in the basin. And I would say all the way back to the initial feasibility assessment that Oregon Consensus and the Ruckelshaus Center did to really try to learn the lay of the land and ask. I mean, over 250 interviews with people. And I think what the 4 states are doing now is what those initial people wished for, which was to fill a gap in this basin and to be a hub with spokes, not to take over anybody's actions, but to help knit them together as a basin and to help actions, the compounding benefit of being in one place and striving with one voice to push forward actions in the basin. And I think that's, as I listen to the 4 states and moving this initiative forward, it is a big lift. And people hear this all the time. You do have to suspend your disbelief, but the key is to keep moving and to keep the momentum and to get going and make this the place that people want to come to coordinate and collaborate and communicate to get action. And I'm trying to knit some threads of this conversation and what a lot of you are saying here today and how it resonates, I think, with what you're hearing from the 4 states in this process design that they're offering in the basin. I want to grab the participant hands that are up, and then we'll see if we can get a few more out of the Q&A. So this is Rick Mogren. If you want to go ahead, welcome.
Thank you, Deb. My name is Rick Mogren, and I currently work with the Center for Public Service at the Mark Hatfield School of Government. And I've worked with a number of people on this call, either on the panel there or in the participant groups on various issues of governance over the years. And I just want to start by adding my compliments and recognition for just what a huge positive step forward this process is. So many of our past governance efforts have focused on better decision-making, but that's been defined as who gets to make the decisions. And so they've tended to be a bit exclusionary, either excluding non-government folks, excluding the tribes, excluding the states, excluding the feds going forward. And this is the first effort, I think, where we've had a real, truly inclusive effort to try to get to a better decision as opposed to deciding who gets to make the decisions. So I just want to recognize that and compliment the folks that are involved in that. My question goes to Mike Edmondson. And Mike, I'm singling you out here because you happen to brief the chart on this, and it's on the participation. We've got so many of the land issues that are done in terms of habitat restoration happen under the jurisdiction of local governments, counties, municipalities, and that sort of thing. At one point, I sat down with a map and counted up 107 counties spread across 7 states. And that's where your zoning decisions are made. That's where land use decisions are often made, a lot of water decisions. Chair Brigham mentioned forestry and other land management practices that can affect this. One of the big complaints often from those involved in habitat restoration work is that for every acre that's restored in one part of the basin, 1 or more acres is lost somewhere else because of development. And so my question, Mike, is, and for anybody else who has an answer to this, is to what degree do you all envision reaching out to local governments, either for participation purposes or to influence those decisions that are made at that level that can have a huge impact on the ecosystem of the basin as a whole? Thank you.
Sure, Eric, I'll take a crack at it. And it's funny because I was trying to end run Deb's plan to get questions out of the chat box by answering as many as possible so that she'd run out of options. So I had just been writing a little bit about that. So a couple of initial thoughts. One, Idaho and the way I see good government is it should all be voluntary. We could put this to a working group to come up with, a suite of best practices, a suite of proposed city ordinances, county ordinances, a proposed way to work with development so that it can be done. And I'm going to steal a Kevin Scribner term in a salmon safe way. You could take almost Kevin's salmon safe organization that certifies growers of agricultural products, for example, that they do their, they run their operation in a way that's safe for salmon. You could have salmon safe ordinances that could then be promoted or voluntarily adopted. It could be a method to reach out to different entities, say, hey, this is what you got on the books. This is another way to look at it. Take it or leave it. All these other entities have adopted it, whatever. I mean, you see that in terms of state legislation, a group that has an interest or a passion about something, and it doesn't matter what it is, and I don't want to pick a controversial one, will promote some draft legislation. They'll put together what they would just love to see, and then they will go shop it to states, and they will promote it and lobby for it. And that could be a model that could filter down to, say, a county level. The second part of the question, it's not the second part of the question, the second part of my answer to your question, Eric, is the participation of our federal partners. We're looking to have 4 seats, but the discussion among the federal partners is, hey, it's just not the action agencies sitting here. I think we're hoping for active participation by our federal land managers, our partners at Fish and Wildlife Service as well, maybe through interaction with the federal caucus, maybe more direct interaction. But as far as land management goes, some of those very things that you talk about at the county level, I think are also very applicable to, forest and BLM lands, and can be affected through their land use management plans. So anybody else? That makes me nervous.
I don't want to make you nervous, Mike, so I'll follow up. But no, I think it's a good answer. And I mean, if you look at our diagram, a process diagram, and implementation, one of the boxes says state, federal, and tribal governments, and I see the local counties as included in the state government part of that. And so there's I think there are certain circumstances, certain actions that may call for recommendations to local counties, perhaps even if it's just a permitting process for a major habitat restoration project. So I think there's linkage there, and I think the way I interpret our process, it's incorporated in there.
Thank you, Guy.
Thanks, Rick, for being with us. All right. So I'm watching the time, and it is about 1:15. I don't see other hands up on the participant list. Mike, I did notice you answering some of the questions and trying to get some of them very efficient of you. We will take a hard look at all the questions. The odds are Mike did a great job in his usual succinct and minimal way. Few words with much clout, but the whole team will make sure to take a look at all the questions that got put into the Q&A section. I also just want to say that there are some, we've been trying to put together some internal Q&As, just like big picture topics that people around the basin might have. And so both of those kinds of documents, we'll make sure that those might take a little bit longer, a couple weeks to get it really filled out in a robust way and then post it to Idaho's website. We are heading into the wrap up. And so I'm going to ask the panel, if you wished I had a few more, I would, but there's lots put in here, and I'm just going to maybe leave the rest of these because I'm worried about the wrap up time. What I do want to say, a number of the the final ones had some process related questions. And, you know, as Mike said in the wrap up from the presentation, that there is a draft charter that's going to strive to have balanced representation, both in the working groups, at the integration and recommendations table. And I want to reiterate what Jim said about the power of the regional caucus approach, that it's a real opportunity for bigger groups of people to engage in dialogue and align around interest and bring that back when you get to the integration and recommendations table, or when you're at the working group process, you know, or as you're thinking about how to take really great solid recommendations out of the integration recommendations and into the basin for implementation. So there's just so many different ways people can engage. And, you know, I think it's commendable. The 4 states are looking for how to maximize engagement and to keep it diverse and representative and open and transparent. All of the best practices of what it means to stand up a group like this. The last piece I saw in the chat that I just wanted to address was this, and what about the process itself? So once it's up and running, there'll be a way to share meeting summaries and to keep the meetings open and allowing people to be in the audience the same way any other kind of big basin-wide or part of a basin-wide collaborative might operate. And it's just a matter of time to get things moving. I am now going to hand it back towards the next steps. And in doing this, just want to be expressing appreciation for the sheer number of participants that are here, both listening. We're hoping each of you becomes a bit of an ambassador and an emissary of the goodwill that's here and the hard work that's been done, and that your participation makes a huge difference. So if we could go ahead and put the next step slide up on the screen, we'll go ahead and head into the wrap up. So there's just a lot that has been done, and the compliments are also much appreciated, and everybody knows this. There's still lots left to do. And if we go to the next slide, you know, we're looking here in June. We were last with you in February, and now I think there's a slide. Am I missing a slide? Oh, sorry. This is Jim. Oh, this one. This is the one I wanted. Good. I just couldn't find that one on the screen. Thank you. Just, you know, that we're here in June, that when we last were here with you in February, there was a lot of input, and over the past 4 or 5 months, just a really big lift to get to here. And if you look at the summer months, this June, July, August is the time that, as Jim was kind of walking you through the steps looking forward, lots of good work of taking the names, the hearing about your interest. Please, I'm going to ask you this 5 different ways to fill out the feedback survey. The link is here on the screen, but you'll get it as you exit the meeting today. So give any more of your feedback, ideas, suggestions, names, ideas for funding sources, whatever it might be. Go ahead and drop those in. And then working on that over the summer months to setting up an opportunity in the fall to do a kickoff. And there's not a date on the books yet, but the interest is to keep the momentum going and be able to have this happen into the fall months. I am Jim. I'm going to pause for a minute. You want to add anything more on just the substance or interest and intent in next steps for this piece?
Yeah, I think I could say, you know, as Deb is going through these next steps, I really want to stress with everyone on the phone here that this is not our next steps. We're inviting you to come to the table now and help us with these next steps. And when the partnership is up and running, you know, the parties on that integration recommendation team and the parties on the work groups, we're all going to be working together. It's no longer, you know, the 4 states are putting this option out there to move forward, but we're really inviting folks now to come in and actually be active participants in this effort. So I think this is an important threshold moment.
I also think it's important for people to think of your 4 state reps here as part of the conduit to what Jim just said. So in each of the emails that Samantha sends out on behalf of the 4 states, you have the email address for Mike, Guy, Jim, and Mike from Montana also. So for the 4 states together, and they have dedicated through their governor's offices the efforts to keep this momentum going. So many of you have reached out, they've reached out to you, and please continue to do so. So next step specifically is to keep working forward with both representation on that integration and recommendations group, to hear your ideas for who might want to participate in which kinds of topical areas. So there's a whole list of topical areas for the work group function. So both topics as well as names for those. Thinking about how to use the caucus process and how to help that be a conduit back and forth to each of these group efforts. And then eventually, not yet, but there's a draft charter that's ready for the group once it convenes in the fall to work together on a lot of these other questions that showed up in the box about how to do documentation, how to make sure that meetings stay open and transparent, that people are invited, that there is an interested persons list as well as a participant list. So you all ask great questions on process, substance, and communication. So I think that might be it on the next steps themselves. And then I think, is it back to you, Jim, I think, to close the meeting out?
Sure, happy to. Well, first, thanks to the more than 200 who chimed in today to join this conversation. The 4 state governors signed a letter, as Mike mentioned at the very beginning, last October, and kind of instructed us to move forward and build this this framework for everyone to participate in. So it's, as I mentioned, this is kind of a threshold moment where the 4 states, we're presenting this opportunity. We're really looking forward to now bringing our sovereign partners, the tribes, feds, and the stakeholders to the table where we're all working together on these issues. We are committed to the collaboration process. We're committed to setting up a safe place for meaningful participation. And that meaningful participation is not just a seat at the table, but a strong voice at that table. I've heard a couple things today, and I just, responding to those, we will strive for consensus and work hard towards consensus. And when I say we, that again, that's not the 4 states, that'll be all the parties at the table. Tribal governments, feds, and the NGOs, striving for consensus. If there's a party or parties that aren't on board with a particular recommendation, we will document that. But those parties don't have a veto right to nix a recommendation from moving forward.
Uh-oh, looks like Jim just froze. Maybe.
Parties will work, of course, strive for nix the effort because they seem to have a different view of the science. I think those are all very important elements. One, that we're all at the table together, we're all striving for consensus. At the end of the day, hopefully we'll have the weight of our collective recommendations to help propel action to move forward. I also want to thank Jeremy Takala for his opening comments. I thought they were fantastic, including his prayer. It's hard to follow that, and I know my closing comments can't come close to being as articulate or meaningful. But at this point in time, I'm very excited. I know the state of Oregon, the governor of Oregon is excited. Our partners have put a lot of hard work into this effort. I think this Columbia Basin Collaborative can do great things. I'm looking forward to seeing success in the near term. I think we all recognize there are time critical issues, and we'll do our best to address time critical issues, but we're also striving for long-term sustainable comprehensive fixes to many of these issues that are impacting the basin, salmon and steelhead in this basin. So with that, I just want to say thank you. I want to thank my partners. It's been great working with you all, and I'm looking forward to the next couple of months and getting this thing chartered and up and running.
That's great. Can I take care of one bit of housekeeping, Jim? Those really eloquent comments. Samantha let me know that she's already receiving a number of names being submitted to be on the implementation recommendations team. And what we want to remind people is that there's an interest from the 4 states that you use a caucus method, because there are going to be limited seats at that table. and that the interest is for each of those 4 sectors, as a, for instance, where the NGO has 4 sectors of representation with 2 seats per, that the interest is that people caucus amongst themselves and bring forward 2 names per sector, if at all possible. Am I right, Jim?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
We identified 4 sectors: utilities, river economies, non-tribal fisheries, and conservation. And we're looking at those folks to talk amongst themselves and identify 2 names for each sector, and hopefully be able to do that by the end of next month.
Right. And then when it comes to people that would like to participate in any of the work groups, you can submit your name and let Samantha know if you either have ideas for the work groups or where you'd like to participate in work groups, and she can hang on to all that and house all that. And that can be used as the process kicks off in the fall. Is that correct to say? Yes? Okay, good. We just want to make sure to clarify that. And again, reach back out to the representatives here if you have more questions. I just thought while we had everybody here, we'd say that. So thank you again. Thank you to all the state representatives. Thank you to the wonderful audience, to the crowd of people that are here, and really pleased and wishing you all the best, and stay safe and healthy. Thank you, everybody. Workshop's adjourned. Take care.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.